All right, today we're going to unpack a really powerful idea from investor Ray Dalio. He's looking at the dangerous connection between a massive market bubble and a massive wealth gap. Let's get right into it.
So this is the central question, right? What actually happens when these two forces collide? And it goes way beyond just economics. We're talking about an explosive mix of financial and social pressure, a mix that has a pretty scary track record throughout history.
So, what makes the current situation so risky in his eyes? It's not just the bubble, and it's not just the wealth gap. It's that they're happening at the exact same time. And to really understand why this combination is so fragile, we have to get one core concept completely straight.
And that concept is this, plain and simple. Wealth is not the same thing as money. Now that might sound kind of basic, but trust me, understanding this difference is the absolute key to Dalio's entire argument. It explains everything about how bubbles form, and more importantly, how they burst. Think of financial wealth like the price tag on your house or what your stock portfolio says it's worth. It's a number on a screen. And as Dalio points out, it's ridiculously easy to create. A few trades can send a company's value soaring, creating billions in paper wealth. But here's the thing. You can't walk into a store and buy groceries with a stock certificate. Money, on the other hand, is the real deal. It's the cash in your wallet, the balance in your checking account. It's what you actually use to settle your debts and buy things. And unlike financial wealth, you can't just create more of it. Its supply is tightly controlled. And right here is the fundamental tension. Financial wealth is really just a promise to deliver money in the future. It's an IOU. But money is what actually settles that promise. One is easy to create, the other is hard to create. And that imbalance is exactly where the danger is hiding. So this brings us to Dalio's 3 core principles. First, financial wealth is just a valuation. It's not real value yet. Second, that wealth is useless until you can turn it into spendable cash. And third, and this is the crucial part, the only way to do that is to sell your assets. And that act of selling is the trigger that can pop a bubble. And this quote from Dalio just nails it. Bubbles don't pop because everyone suddenly agrees that something is overvalued. No, they pop because people are forced to sell to get cash, maybe to pay off the very debts they used to buy the assets in the first place. So, okay, it's a good theory, but does it hold up in the real world? Well, Dalio argues it absolutely does, and he uses one of the most famous financial events in history as his case study, the bubble and bust of the late 1920s. And you can see the pattern just plays out perfectly. First, you get easy credit fueling a buying frenzy. Then, credit tightens up and suddenly people need actual money for their loans. This forces them to sell assets, which triggers a collapse, which then leads to massive political change and eventually a government response to create more money. And this is such a key insight into the Roaring Twenties. The market wasn't soaring because everyone had tons of cash. It was soaring because people were borrowing heavily to buy stocks. They were creating this huge mountain of financial wealth and debt, but there just wasn't enough actual money to back it all up. And once the selling started, it just created this vicious, self-reinforcing cycle. The need for cash led to selling, which pushed prices down. Falling prices created more panic, which forced even more people to sell, which pushed prices down even further. It's a classic death spiral. And the consequences? They weren't just financial. The bust led straight into the Great Depression, causing immense social and political chaos. This led to a sweeping political change with the election of FDR, who then came in and implemented these dramatic policies to redistribute wealth, including raising the top income tax rate to a staggering 79%. So how does any of this connect to today? Well, Dalio argues that this historical playbook offers a chillingly familiar framework for our current moment. He sees the same 2 key ingredients in place right now. First up, the wealth gap. The share of income held by the top tier of society today is at a level that's comparable to the peak of the 1920s, right before the crash. And that kind of situation tends to create significant social and political tension. And that wealth is incredibly concentrated. I mean, get this. The top 10% of households hold a staggering 90% of all stocks. Now think about what that means. Any shock that forces people to sell is going to be concentrated among a very small group, but the effects are going to ripple out and hit everyone. The second ingredient is the feeling that governments are kinda stuck. Dalio argues that because of high debt levels and political polarization, they just don't have a lot of good options.
They can't easily borrow more, raise taxes, or cut spending without causing some major political or economic blowback. So, if you have a massive bubble, a massive wealth gap, and governments with limited room to move, the whole situation is like a financial tinderbox. So, what could be the spark? What's the event that could force everyone to rush for the exits and try to convert their wealth into money all at once?
This is really the final and most critical part of the whole analysis. What could be the modern equivalent of that credit tightening that happened back in 1929? Well, Dalio suggests one potential trigger could be the implementation of a wealth tax. As political pressure grows to address the wealth gap, the idea of taxing wealth directly, not just income, is becoming a lot more prominent. To understand why this could be a trigger, you just have to look at the scale. The total financial wealth held by U.S. households is immense, around $150 trillion. But remember our first rule? That's wealth, not money. Now look at this. Of that $150 trillion, less than $5 trillion of it actually exists as cash or in deposits. There is a massive, massive gap between the promises to pay, the financial wealth, and the actual money available to settle those promises. So here's the crucial point. If you impose even a small wealth tax, say just 1 or 2%, people would need trillions of dollars in cash to pay it. And with less than $5 trillion in cash in the entire system, where would that money come from? It would have to come from selling assets on a massive scale, potentially triggering that same self-reinforcing bust we saw back in 1929. And that leaves us with this final, kind of chilling question. Our entire financial system is built on promises to deliver money. And Dalio's framework suggests we've built a mountain of these promises on a tiny foundation of actual money, all during a time of great social division. So what happens when the bill finally comes due?